All right. I am super excited for this panel because we are going to talk about actually running charging infrastructure, what it's actually like from people who are actually doing it. So, really looking forward to this conversation. We're going to deep dive into what does the day to day look like? What does maintenance look like? What does software look like? Uptime, energy costs, and how do they manage these things in their fleets today? So with me, we have got Angelo Klaric here. Angelo is City of Toronto Sustainable Fleets Program Manager. He contributes to the City of Toronto's leadership position in environmental stewardship and advancing the city's corporate and strategic priorities for the last 10 years. With the largest municipal fleet in Canada and one of the largest and most diverse fleets in North America, the City of Toronto plays an important leadership role in advancing technologies that significantly reduce environmental impacts, improve vehicle efficiency, reliability, and safety while reducing life cycle costs. Next, we've got Michelle Jones from the TTC. Michelle heads renewable energy programs for the TTC. The Renewable Energy Program Department supports the TTC's conventional, paratransit, and also the non-revenue vehicle fleet electrification. So she's in charge of fleet electrification. To cut it short, the TTC has been really on a pioneering journey. I'm totally editing what she wrote here, but a pioneering journey, I'd say, to zero emissions for several years. In 2017, which is really early days as far as this industry goes, the TTC board approved the Green Bus program, which includes the transition of conventional transit buses and paratransit fleet. The plan was updated to then include non-revenue fleet in alignment with the City of Toronto's Sustainable Fleets Plan. The Sustainable Fleets Plan targets 20% zero emission by the end of 2025, which is
Next
like
year?
tomorrow. Yeah. 50% at the end of 2030 and 100% by 2040. To complete these heavy and medium duty fleets, the TTC is in the planning stages for employee and customer electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And Michelle, you also didn't mention in this intro that the TTC has the largest electric bus fleet in North America.
Well, no, we got one up by out west, but we will again have that largest fleet very soon. As soon
Okay,
as we
she's
start
competitive.
delivery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
Edmonton
Okay.
one upped us by one, but
Okay.
yeah.
But
But
close
just
competition.
give us a few weeks.
Okay, excellent. And then Viren Rodrigues, really happy to have you from Coke Canada. Viren is a senior manager of fleet at Coca-Cola Canada Bottling Limited. Coke's Viren has been with Coke for over 10 years in varying roles, and in this role for the last 3. Coke Canada is a family-owned business operating 5 plants and 50 locations across the country. Coke operates a fleet of approximately 900 power units. And I had to ask Viren, what's a power unit? And he said it's anything with a motor. Okay. So, and he divided it for me into 550 tractors, 120 straight trucks, and 230 service vans. So that's what Viren's got to manage, which is a lot of different vehicles. Coke has run 2 pilots in electrification, one in light duty, 3 service vans. The techs operate to fix equipment in the trade. And on the heavy fleet side, Coke is operating 6 electric tractors, so class 8, in Montreal, and is moving forward with limited expansions in both spaces. So, super excited to hear from each of you what's going on. So, let's just start with if you could give us a snapshot of what's a day in the life of operating your electric fleet. And Viren, we'll start with you.
I'm not sure if this is, yeah. What I would say is we're operating a fleet, right? So it's not necessarily an electric fleet. The electric vehicles are just part of our fleet. So every day, routes are generated, and then we're assigning those routes to the assets that make sense. And we're obviously prioritizing our electric assets just because they're generating those fuel savings, which we help meet our sustainability goals as well as our fuel savings goals. So really about operating our fleet in general and just making sure that the electric assets are part of that mix.
Thanks. Michelle?
We're very similar. So in 2019, we started with our first 60 buses. Starting at the end of this month, we'll start delivery of the next 340 buses, right, bringing our fleet to 400. And the 60 are right in the middle of the mix. They're a regular part of the fleet mix. They go out on. We don't put them on any special runs like, oh, we didn't baby the fleet. They're just normal part. They're at 3 depots, 4 depots right now, and by the time we get the other 240 in, we'll have 7 depots worth of buses, bringing ourselves to 20% fleet mix. So it's just a regular part of our day.
Okay, so it sounds like both of you don't give preferential or different treatment to those electric vehicles. You're really just integrating them as part of your.
Like for us, we did a 2 year head-to-head pilot, and yes, we started off small. We cherry picked which routes, but we had to make our way through each and every route to make sure that the vehicle technology was going to work for us. So when we did that 2 year head-to-head evaluation, I don't like to say pilot evaluation, it gave us an opportunity to figure out what we want for our next purchase, and so we have our own specification for the 340, right? And we have a couple vendors that were able to make buses for us to satisfy those specs.
Yeah, for us, it's just a little bit different because what we do is already we have a mixed fleet, right? So we have a mix of assets that do different things. So we're mapping the assets to the right routes based on both load and range. But they are suitable for a significant percentage. We're running them in Montreal today, and it's about 70% of that Montreal facilities. What it does, they're capable of doing that. So it's a good percentage that they are applicable and useful for.
Okay, great. So, Angelo, what about you? What's a day to day like with the fleet?
Well, Michelle and Viren pretty much covered it all, but I would say just to highlight what they mentioned, it's a part of the regular fleet management. This is just another energy source or fuel, if you want to call it. With the only difference that there were a few aspects of certain operational applicability that might not be necessarily met by the zero emission, or in this case, electric vehicles that we considered. But other than that, they're managed normally, and we're still in the early stages of the utilizing the software and the systems to basically better manage the energy consumption and the cost associated with that as the fleet grows. And just the final component, not that it's a competition, but 8% today, 8% of our fleet is zero emission vehicles already. So.
Okay, great. Okay, so once the chargers are installed, which is already a big feat, right? Getting those chargers in place. What challenges did you face in operationalizing charging, getting it to steady state? What's your advice for getting through that as smoothly and quickly as possible? So, Viren.
Yeah, so I think where we struggle the most, and it was a pilot for us, so our first 6 heavy fleet assets was interoperability. So there's a handshake that happens between the tractor and the charger, and there's communication that's ongoing through the charging process, and we certainly had challenges in that space. Eventually, it took getting both the truck manufacturer and Siemens engineers and Siemens engineers on site to really take a look at it and figure it out. Then it was a matter of software upgrades to get it up and running, but it did take some time, and that was certainly a struggle that I think ideally longer term we're aware of it and we can get ahead of that before we're looking to get on the road.
Yeah, we definitely see that as new vehicles are coming out, there always has to be that interop between the vehicles and the chargers. And then also there's always the firmware update question. And how do we make sure that as the vehicles and the chargers both get their firmware updates, that it doesn't cause some kind of snags in, it's sort of like two partners dancing, but they keep changing their props, right? So you've got to just keep making sure that the necklace is not hanging on to the tie every time that someone changes. So I think that's something that the industry is still trying to figure out. Um, okay, Michelle, what about you?
So during the head-to-head evaluation, one of the things besides evaluating the buses, we also evaluated interoperability with the chargers, as well as we focused on availability. So for the first 60, what we did decide to do is that we went with all plug-in dispensers, right? And we did that because it was just faster for us to do that. The lead time compared to a panto at the time is much shorter, and so it was, and we knew also about the availability, that there were less availability issues, right? Because talking about like things like crosstalk, like when we put in our pantos, we had when we were installing them, there was a little bit of crosstalk between the bus and the panto, and so like we had to think about that. But now we progressed past that into looking at things like what's the ratio of charge points, right? Like we started with one bus to one charge point. Sorry, but that's not really economical, right? And so, we're working through in this next batch of 340, we're going to try and do 4 buses to 3 charge points. And then because the technology is also advancing with the charging manufacturers, we're going to have like 4 charge points to 5 buses. And we're working through that with our bus maintenance team to make sure that it's not disrupting their service. Another point that we have to work through is, as we said earlier, is that this is part of the regular fleet and service planning. You have to work with service planning on there, right? Because right now we have some buses, diesel buses. I don't know if I'm allowed to use those words, but they're out there sometimes for like 26 hours, right? The bus stays out there, operators change out, and so you can't compete with that with an e-bus. You're going to have to find a way. And so we're working with service planning to see how we can split up the schedules and the blocks so that way it can suit the e-bus service without trying to double the fleet or trying to double the operators. So we're trying to maximize mileage on the e-buses as well as minimize the increase to operations. So those are some of the key things that we thought about. And then the last part is that we haven't ruled out pantos. Obviously, we started with plugins, but we know that pantos and plugins would be part of our fleet mix. And so we have 10 pantos right now. We're increasing that system to 20 by the end of this year, and we'll continue working through that. So our buses have both charging rails and ports for plug-in.
Okay, super interesting on the charge point ratio to vehicle, because it can make people nervous too, and is that going to hit me on resiliency in some way? What about on power levels? Can you talk a little bit about how you've selected power levels or your thinking on power levels?
So, what we did at first is that we had more of a charge management solution that just gave us basic information about the chargers, what the buses are doing, and making sure that we stayed within the site loads. We've now transitioned to a new system, which is more where we see it's going to be a full energy management system. So we start with the basic charge management, right? We've transitioned to Better Fleet now. And the next thing that we're going to do is going to have a bidirectional information from the telematics to the charging, right? And even with the advantage of just changing to this different solution, it helps us with going, okay, this bus is coming in at 80%, this one's at 75. Let's just top up the 80 to 90 and then move on to the next. So those are some of the things that we're working through, and then eventually we will have optimized solutions where we're going to have better energy costs.
Right. Yeah. That'll come into our other question around the software, the data, and how we optimize exactly on energy costs. So super interesting. Okay, Angelo, what challenges did you guys face in operationalizing, and what do fleets need to do to make this happen smoothly?
Thanks. So interop is a perfect example of the importance of engagement with all of the key internal and external stakeholders and developing a partnership to ensure, especially when it comes to medium and heavy duty vehicles, because it's more sensitive and it's more crucial to ensure that once you get an influx of those vehicles, that the charging infrastructure works well with it. The other sometimes neglected component is the user adoption itself, right? The fleet users are just like us with our personal vehicles. So there's some trepidations in terms of adoption of the new technology. So constant communication, transparent communication, outreach, education, and this applies to both utilization, proper utilization of the electric vehicles, and the charging infrastructure would ensure that the operational services and the requirements for delivering of the city services, in our case, are met to most efficiently and effectively, but also that the charging consumption or energy consumption as we grow in our fleet is managed and controlled, which is an important financial and component of any business, and that goes for our business as well. So as we, I'm not trying to undermine the effort that it took for us to get to where we are, roughly 300 chargers at more than 100 locations, but they're mostly level 2 with some entry-level fast chargers because it's mostly light and some medium duty vehicles. But the experience that our colleagues, Michelle and the rest of the TTC, have had with the early from 2017 adoption and development of the depot style charging infrastructure is tremendous help and benefit to the rest of the city for deployment of the medium and heavy infrastructure. But we do have an added complexity that even though there's a large chunk of our medium and heavy duty vehicles that will be met through the depot application, we do also under our scope have the emergency response vehicles. And as everyone knows, we can't bunch all of the fire trucks into one depot. They have to, their needs have to be met at their location. So that complexity we're currently working through in terms of assessment, design, planning, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a big next step for us.
Yeah, and you've also got so many vehicle types, very different types of vehicles. I think that's
Yes.
one of the most challenging aspects of your fleet.
And in your introduction, you mentioned that it's one of the more complex fleets. We have just under 11,000 vehicles in fleet. That includes TTC transit vehicles as well. And in the scope of the corporate infrastructure development, it's all of the city vehicles except the revenue vehicles by TTC that are handled masterfully by our colleagues from TTC. But the cooperation and sharing of the knowledge, in this case internally, but also externally, is a critical component for us to move collectively along the road of decarbonizing and addressing the climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies for all organizations, not just the government, such as the City of Toronto.
Yeah, Michelle.
So I just wanted to chime in about the part where working with stakeholders and nervousness about the charge point ratio, right? Wanting us to be conservative. So we are working through with our stakeholders. We're doing exercises like we've been planning for months, and we're going to use diesel buses and pretend that they're hooked up for the amount of time and do the bus movements through everything to make sure that that works. But the other part I did want to say is the partnership that we have is great with the city. So, in the intro, you did talk about that, there's a lot of focus on us as heavy duty, but I have the non-revenue fleet, and that's going to be enabled by working with the city and partnering on contracts, right? So, we've come this way with the heavy duty. They come with the vehicle procurements and the medium and light duty infrastructure, and we just install.
Yeah, great cross
We
learning.
don't want to make this city fest.
Yeah. Well, he's coming to visit us.
Oh, well, I will. Yeah, exciting.
Okay, my favorite now, software. So when it comes to utilizing software, and um, maybe I'll just talk a bit about, I've created a little model to help us think through some of these steps, and I call it VISO, so Vehicle Infrastructure Software Operations. And I find that we all love the vehicle, and we talk a lot about the vehicle, and it is a tough mountain to climb, the vehicle purchase, and all of that. And when we finally get to the vehicles, we're like, okay, now, oh, I need infrastructure. And then it's like, okay, I need infrastructure. I need infrastructure. It's tough. It's expensive. Oh my God. And then you get through that and you're like, okay, I need software, right? So now, if we're on Mount software, what have you learned? What are you seeing? How are you utilizing it? And maybe it's early days and that's fine, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts and what should people be thinking about as they start to look ahead to Mount software? So, Michelle?
So I already mentioned that we just switched to a new software platform where we're starting with doing a transition from basic charge management. Then we'll do the telematics part. And then the last part is the optimization. But I didn't talk about that. It's optimization of our full microgrid. It's not just, just how much the chargers can do. We also have energy storage on site, right? And so we want to use those energy storage units to help with the peak shaving. So that software will enable that, so that instead of someone plugging in and then using it in the middle of the five peaks, we can first go to battery storage and use that. Our next part of the microgrid that we're working on is to integrate in solar PV so that we can start filling up the battery storage instead of using the grid to fill up the battery storage units. We can at least use some natural sunlight to do that. So having a software like that will help orchestrate that. And then on the back end as well is that we have some emergency backup generators, because we can't afford, like 20 something years ago, where the eastern seaboard was out for days and we still had to run service. And so when we built into our plans, we built in the backup generation that it would turn on if the grid goes out after a certain amount of time, and then that starts to feed our system. So
Yeah,
you
that's
need the EMS to conduct that.
exactly. So that's taking it beyond just charging management, but all the way to full site energy management with DERs, or distributed energy resources. Like microgrids have been happening for quite a while. The technology is there, but to combine microgrids and charging at scale at depot is still pretty new. So there are some examples, but you will be a pretty leading edge example when this all rolls out.
Yeah, so our first setup in the one place, set it up so that it could scale up to 120 buses charging at once. Like, we had to try and put it to its limits. I can't wait for us to have the 120 buses, but at least that's the kind of scaling that we've been thinking about.
Yeah, no, it's very, very ambitious. Um, okay, who's gonna go next? Viren.
Sure. So I would say we're much earlier in this journey, right? So much smaller. Charging software hasn't been a big concern for us so far, and we're doing a lot of our charging at night, right? So there isn't too much energy management that we have to manage just yet. But we're going to have to continue to look at this, and I think it gets trickier and trickier as it develops. I think for us on the software side, telematics is huge, both from evaluating the right assets for that. And moving forward, I think the telematics software is also going to have to play a role in integrating with the charging software to really give us the best view of how we're going to operationalize those assets. But that's still to be developed, right? So, and we're struggling with our telematics right now. I think they're working on it. But we use telematics across our whole fleet, right? So it's a big part of our day to day, and it just needs to be part of that EV aspect as well.
Yeah, exactly. Bringing that telematics data together with the energy costs and the charging data, and using that to learn and to predict, is really going to be what enables the scaling at the least cost. Yeah, and the successful completion of the routes.
Yeah, yeah. But we have not had anybody not finish a route yet. But if that happened, it would be quite frustrating for sure. So I mean, again, we're earlier, but the more and more we get into this space, the more and more this becomes a challenge. So
Yeah,
software is going to be key.
Angelo, how do you see it?
Um, just to add, in terms of importance of software and especially smart system, it's important to look at it from the get-go as an integral part. The infrastructure, charging infrastructure, be an integral part of the facilities, buildings, so that we're looking at the energy management for the entire site, whatever the site is used for. That way, the whatever operations are delivered from those locations will not be impacted in any way down the road when we scale up, when there's more demand for electricity for vehicles and electricity for buildings as well. The other component that we also, to Viren's point, utilizing the telematics, and this is where our partnership with some of the key partners such as Siemens has played out, in a small but not insignificant aspect is the integration of telematics into our smart system, charge management system, to enable authentication and access to charging for authorized city vehicles. That's requirement for any application in any aspect, and it will enable us to implement, which is also planned for to happen soon in the city, to expand the current pilot programs for workplace charging. So that way there will be a seamless way to differentiate between a city vehicle and a personal vehicle for allowing the charge to happen.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And even just the whole topic of authentication, I think is just something, just a keyword for everyone to keep in their mind. How are your drivers going to authenticate at the charger, if that's needed? And maybe another thing we haven't really touched on it, but is just site connectivity, right? Making sure, because this thing is not just about electrical, but it's also about the digital and the telecoms, and making sure that you have cellular or Wi-Fi, because this is IoT. Like, if you can't connect, then you're out, right? So I think just making sure that there's a solid connectivity plan for the charging infrastructure, and backup for that connectivity plan is also super important. I know we didn't discuss it in the prep,
But
but just
but
throwing
it's
it out
true.
there.
It's like
Yeah.
our chargers are hardwired as well as have the cellular, right? You have to have that backup. They need to work, right? And then even if we lose connectivity across the whole system, then there's another layer that it knows, okay, within this microgrid, I can operate to this, right? Like, it has that, okay, this is the limit that we can do charging at until we get the full solution back up. It's a very important thing. And I do appreciate you saying about with your Viso model that infrastructure is important, because we do live in the shadow of the bus procurement people. So I appreciate this.
Yay. I had to make Mountain 2 for
Yay.
infrastructure. Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about maintenance and uptime. And so, how do you handle, there's preventative maintenance, that's kind of easy, you do it on the schedule, right? But the corrective maintenance, when it has to be done like quick, right? And spare parts and all that jazz. So how are you managing it? Michelle, maybe you can take a crack at it.
Okay, so I can go backwards. With the spare parts, we made sure that we identified what the critical parts were, and before we changed over the capital side of it, we bought a bunch of those so that they're available if we need it, especially things with long lead time. Like, not everybody has like the Panto sitting around, so we make sure that we have some of those. We have a great package for our plug-in chargers, and the fact is that we have blocks for preventative. We have blocks of service time set away for the corrective, as well as we use those blocks for other things too. Like when we transition to different software, you have to have your OEMs involved to make sure that your software is working, right? You can't just assume that you get the bus and you get the charger and everybody's going to talk well, right? So we use those kind of blocks as well. And then our last package was really about the connectivity and making sure that things are working well there, that we have the on-air updates, we have APIs, connections for APIs, and 24/7 monitoring.
Okay, yeah. That you've spoken like a person with experience.
28 years next week.
Woo, wow. Awesome. Okay, Angelo, how about on your side?
Did I mention that we work closely with TTC on learning from their medium and heavy, which is the segment of our fleet that it's more critical for that maintenance. On the light duty, or mostly, as I mentioned, level 2 and some entry level 3 chargers or fast chargers. It's still early days, and how early, I'll just tell you that we're still in warranty period for most of them, if not all of them. But we are developing and learning from so that we are ready when we scale up in terms of the heavy duty charging for medium and heavy duty vehicles. So
Okay, great. And Viren, how do you handle that for now?
Yeah, so we're early as well. So all of our equipment is under warranty, but we've built in a little bit of redundancy. So we have three chargers, and each of the chargers is paired with three dispensers today. But we only have six trucks, right? So we've just got some redundancy where theoretically, if one charger is down or up to three dispensers is down, we can still operate. But there's still challenges. I mean, and we're still obviously pushing, but it's really important to have good vendor relationships. Or I'm a very pushy customer, I can be. So if something's down, we're pushing to make sure it gets back up and running for sure. So, but yeah, definitely, it's been interesting. It's still early, but and everything is under warranty today. So we're pushing, and we expect our partners to step up and make sure that they meet their requirements.
Yeah, no pressure. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle.
I had one more point that I forgot to say is that so when we started our journey, the operation and the maintenance component of it, we handled internally, working directly with our OEMs. We had extended warranty. Now we've entered into a 20-year agreement to scale up this with Power On. And so, they're doing the infrastructure delivery, but they're also responsible for operations and maintenance. So we've now working through transferring that risk to them about the availability. And so that's also how we're handling it. Is to
Yeah, you've taken a really interesting approach to really segment off that part of the charging infrastructure.
hmm
And in the beginning, I have to say, I was like thinking, is this going to work? Because the two pieces really have a lot of dependencies, the vehicles and the charging, and it's kind of a dance, like I said,
yeah.
like with these two partners. And now if you say, well, I'm splitting you up, I was just, but I think so far
Yeah,
it's been
I
good,
think
right?
it's gonna work. Yeah, no, I'm confident it's gonna work. I am also one of those pushy customers, so I'm pretty sure that it will work, right?
Good, good. So what about managing energy costs? Vera, and I know you're in Quebec, so your costs are just so low, but still, one day when it scales up, costs will become, this will become your fuel costs, right? Hopefully a lot lower than your fuel costs today. But what are your thoughts on, how to create awareness, optimization, and yeah, just managing those energy costs?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it will be around, look, we've got an application where we know we have a lot of dwell time, because our trucks go out in the morning, they do their routes, and typically they come back. They might go out on one more route, or they might be done for the day. So depending on that route, but then we've got from, call it, at a minimum from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next day to charge. And I think from a charge cost perspective, it's really about time of use. So we're going to continue to look at charging software and what role that plays in terms of just managing, making sure we have the trucks available when we need them, and at the right charge. Like, I mean, at some point, like Michelle was saying earlier, we might know that we actually don't need to be at 100% to start the next day. So we'll continue to evaluate that as it develops. I mean, I think 100% is always a little bit more convenient, but we can take a look at that. There's also battery health concerns, but I think our 100% is already offset on the battery health side. But yeah.
Yeah, there have been people telling me, okay, we don't act, our OEM tells us not to charge to 100%. So they were looking for, the software to be able to manage that, to optimize. So just more the concept that the software can help to optimize the battery health, whatever the OEM specifies.
Yeah, so I think on ours, like, we just don't even see that top portion on our trucks, from my understanding. I could be wrong. So they've told us we're good to charge to 100%, but obviously different OEMs are set up differently. So we're going to continue to evaluate that and we're probably going to be testing an additional OEM as we move forward as well.
And maybe just something to your point about the dwell time, just to make, for everyone here, is that the longer you have as of dwell time, the more flexibility you have, the more optionality you have, and that's really valuable because you just have more time to make decisions, more time to spread your charging activities. So however you can, take advantage of longer dwell time, it's just a strategic advantage in the deployment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, We are fortunate that most of our services, the buses are out there most of the time during the day. They start coming back around 7, 8 o'clock at night. We fill up maybe around 10 o'clock. And so, we talked about the 4 buses to 3 charge points. Our thought is that first batch between 7 and 10, they can be charging, and then the next batch is rolling through. And so we have that time spread from 7 to about 5 to spread that out, right? As well as what we said with bringing in those components of the microgrid, that if you do need to charge in the daytime, then you have that, right? So we did a full fleet electrification study to look at our service to understand, and that's why right now for us depot charging works. We don't actually need to go to opportunity charging at the moment, but we do see that we will need to do something eventually once we go to 50 and maybe 100%.
That was one of those really hot debates like in 2019, 2018, 2019. It was like, you're going to have to do Panto. And people were like, no, or like, no, opportunity charging, and then people were saying no. And people had really like a lot of emotions on either side. But you've proven that this depot chart, the plug-in and depot can do quite a lot.
Yeah, it can. It's working for us. And again, we map through the service, and then we're going to have the service planning group remap the service to make sure that it continues to work for us. But we do know that there will be a breaking point, right? So in that study, we looked at the current technology, the technology that we're about to get at the end of the month, as well as a future bus from 2036. And we know that there will be gaps, and we have to look at opportunity charging. And if we can't solve it with service changes and opportunity, then maybe there's alternate technology we also have to look at.
Yeah. Okay, Angelo, what about you? Energy costs. What are your thoughts on that?
So for us, there's a large segment of the fleet that does sit somewhere overnight at a depot or location. However, the opportune charging for emergency response vehicles and some other segments of the fleet is essential and critical. So that's that added complexity that we need to consider and deploy, and especially because, as I said, it's an integrated approach with the buildings and facilities, and a lot of the buildings, not just in the city of Toronto, but countrywide, have been when they were built back in the day, they'd never considered such a big service or consumption of energy at those locations. So that upfront cost is something that needs to be planned very well, and also in terms of the software as a aid, critical aid in managing the cost, even when it's overnight. Even though having more chargers initially as a aid in user adoption for fleets and publicly as well, the ratio is going to turn around. So that as we add more vehicles, we're not going to continue to add as many chargers, and then software and the user or driver education and training is going to be critical to utilize properly the available chargers when they're needed. And even today, we have not just within a fleet, but also within public that I talk to, people who own the electric vehicles. There is a misconception that you have to plug it in at the end of every day. And like with the many commuters in the city of Toronto, even a large chunk of our fleet doesn't travel too far every day. So weekly, and in some cases even bi-weekly, charge would be sufficient with the increasing range of electric vehicles.
Yeah, we just heard from one fleet that was saying that surprisingly, they thought they were going to have to plug the vehicle in all the time, but they plug it in once a week and it's totally fine. So,
Exactly.
but telematics data actually can tell you that up front. Yeah, so always good to do a telematics data study up front, and then okay, we're wrapping up with our last question here. This journey is a pioneering journey that takes a long time, that takes a lot of stamina, that has many bumps in the road. Every success sort of has three more bumps behind it. But what's been exciting for you, and what keeps you going through this journey in the tough days? Viren, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I would say the biggest thing for us, or for myself, I would say is we launched this in Montreal. We started out with a ride and drive event for our drivers. And I am shocked at how passionate there are. So many people in our organization that are so passionate about this. The leadership team in our Montreal facility has been super supportive. And the drivers have been super passionate about it as well. Um, most of our senior drivers have really embraced it. Actually, I say senior in terms of number of years driving for us. One of them has passed 40 years, and he actually asked us. He went to his supervisor, and he asked that he could drive that vehicle every day until he retires, which is in about 18 months. So it's really awesome. I mean, and he was super excited to go talk to his grandkids about it. So I mean, it's just such a great story. So those are the types of things that really push me forward. I mean, I know there's also great sustainability, but it's awesome when you see so much passion within our organization and within our drivers for the new technologies. So it's awesome.
Yeah, if those of you who might not know, NACV, the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, has done many kind of different pilots called Run on Less and Run on Less Electric and Run on Less Depot, and you can see interviews with drivers, videos from their drivers, and drivers love it. They love it. So just if you want to see if some other reactions, check out NACV Run on Less. Michelle, what keeps you going?
So I know I said that the vehicle always gets the spotlight, but I will say that because I've been involved in this from the beginning, from when we got our first 60 buses, and now we're scaling up. I'm proud to see them rolling down the street. I'm proud to see those e-buses rolling down the street, benefiting us, all right, with improved air quality, the health benefits that comes with that, as well as like less noise, and it's for betterment for our operators and for our customers, right? And the one thing also that I was very proud of is that we chose to implement in areas where it was our neighborhood improvements areas, the area of the city, the areas of the city where people need this transit system the most. So why not bring them the benefits first, right? The health benefits. They're the ones that were out there during COVID. That is a good thing that we were able to service them first.
Yeah, and we know that poor air quality disproportionately affects lower income communities, and so this air quality is also an equity topic, right? Of making sure that people are not overly exposed, kind of in an unjust way to these emissions that we all end up needing and wanting, but just not we don't fairly share the distribution of the negative effects.
And that's the lens that we use when we think about where are we going to deploy to next. That is definitely one of the lenses that we use.
Yeah. Okay, Angelo, to bring us home with what keeps you going.
No pressure. So to Michelle's point, recognizing and celebrating achievements, and I realize that it more and more when I get into the groups like this one and environments like this and engaging with other organizations and realizing how much we have actually achieved already. But there's so much more to achieve. And as everyone knows, climate mitigation and adaptation is a wicked problem, one of probably most wicked ones. So instead of focusing on that big challenge that can often, get you spinning and not knowing where to begin, I recommend what has worked for me and kept me going is to identify something that's relatable, achievable, and that can be, told or communicated in a very enjoyable and translatable story. Because everyone likes stories. Yeah, we all want to share stats and all that, but it doesn't take too much time for numbers to start flying over your head. But something that can be relatable, not necessarily duplicated, but that somebody can connect at that level is very important.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of stories ahead of us, I'm sure, on this journey, and stories that I hope will keep connecting us and will end up cleaning our air and our planet at the same time. So thank you. I want to thank you and let's all thank these people for their pioneering work and their courage in this space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. See you
Thank
soon.
you.